Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Cybersecurity. Today we have another industry leader, Sinan Eren. He comes from a background of red teaming and pen testing, and now he's the founder of several companies, and he's going to share his story both growing in the industry as well as becoming a leader and growing and forming companies. So this is going to be a very interesting episode with lots of insightful details. Aaron, how about you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Christoph. It's wonderful to be with you. All right, so it's been 25 years in the making, so I want to be as brief as possible, but I started my career in the late 90s. I wouldn't quite call it back then, it was an option, really wasn't. We didn't have cybersecurity or information security as a defined, it was a function of IT at best, right? In school, they'll teach you cryptography, maybe some firewall network security lessons. That was pretty much it. I don't remember anything specific to AppSec that was available for computer science students at the time, or you had resources that were more underground centric, right? You have the Frac magazine, you have IRC as your main channel to get introduced. So for me, I could say that it was not a deliberate choice to get into cybersecurity. It was more of a hobbyist curiosity, that youthful thing that we all been through, trying to temper things, break things, experiment with things, or in some cases, gaining access to things, right? Because they were not affordable, they were not accessible. So you just wanted to get a shell somewhere, right? Like all these things kind of drove my initial curiosity, late 90s. And I went through, of course, back then, it was wonderful to look for vulnerabilities, a lot of low hanging fruits. The internet was still in the clear text, right? Nothing was really, encrypted, memory corruption bugs, basic, web application security issues, misconfigurations. Oh, Lord. It was so easy to find holes in every direction you look at. And like a lot of the folks in the late 90s, early 2000s, initially, my curiosity, my quote unquote hobby, become a viable career option. I joined an Israeli startup at the time. I am originally from Istanbul, Turkey, or Turkey as they like to get it, they like to refer to it now. Uh, Grew up in Istanbul in my early 20s, joined an Israeli startup that just relocated to the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and I've been here ever since. So since 2002, all the way to now 25, been through multiple different cybersecurity organizations. Like you said, lately since 2013, in the last 10 years or so, also been actively, starting businesses, building products, and launching them to market. But I'll stop there and see where that goes.
Well, would you say that earlier in your career, when you were trying to do cybersecurity in
Mhm.
Istanbul, trying to start to work for an Israeli startup, that hiring for cybersecurity talent was different than it is here in the US?
It was true US, believe it or not. I don't think any other market existed at the time. So I'll tell you, that's a very good question. It frames that lucky encounter that I had my break into the industry, right?
Hmm.
So mailing list called Bugtraq. I know it resonates with you. Maybe for some of the younger audience, it might be a relic of the past that they've never heard before. But we lived on Bugtraq. We all were subscribers. We all wanted to post, and Ella Fun and David Mirza were the moderators, and we'll like send the email, hit send, and we'll just start praying like they will approve my email, right? I'll hit Bugtraq. Like it's interesting enough to be honored to be distributed to tens of thousands, maybe. I'm guessing that maybe at scale it was hundreds of thousands, but I don't really have the stats. Eventually, the company that operated Bugtraq got acquired by Symantec, and it gradually kind of phased out. But Bugtraq was the beating heart of the information security. Every morning you waited for those emails to hit your inbox. You wanted to reply. You have flame wars, going back and forth 20 times with like paragraphs of text. Uh, and I one day decided to post some of my own findings. These were, I believe, one exotic flavor of a Linux distro at the time, Mandrake, if I remember correctly. I found some vulnerabilities in it on some set UID. Like basically, from a standard user, you were able to escalate to root, gain root privileges. So I posted that. I posted one, then I posted another one in KDE, which was a popular user interface for Linux desktop. Another root privilege escalation. And guess what? That really started triggering inbound queries like, hey, what are you doing? Do you need a job? Would you be interested in joining us? The one was from Thailand, some French dude who moved to Thailand to secure banks. Amazing opportunity. I know some other well-known hackers actually took on that opportunity, but then I got a local one, which I initially decided to join. It was a large, I would say that at the time, the largest mobile carrier in the country. So I started working there, and they provide me a lot of test beds, a lot of, very unreachable, very expensive tools to play with, right? Like we're talking about alpha servers, like massive Sun Spark Solaris machines. So it was a very, I would say, target rich environment for me to start working at a mobile carrier. But at the same time, I was, having these inquiries about new security products that were trying to solve new set of security risks, like for example, memory corruption or self-propagating malware like Code Red, right? And what this Israeli startup that relocated to Silicon Valley called Intercept was one of them. And eventually, instead of being an operator, being on the defensive side, I wanted to try out, like, can I prevent actually these things that I use every day to break into systems, to do pen testing, to offensive security? Can I actually also build defensive measures and solutions that are not signature based? Everything was signature based at the time, that are more heuristic, that are more behavioral. Therefore, I joined and take the opportunity and relocated to Silicon Valley. But Bugtraq started everything.
Well, let's take a second there. For those that might not be deep into it,
Yeah.
explain the difference between the signature-based and the heuristic-based and why that makes such a huge difference in the approach.
Right. Back then, the only established cybersecurity tooling, I would say, was maybe, well, obviously firewalls on the networking side and antivirus at the endpoint. And antivirus was signature based. Basically what that means is you sample, there's always a patient zero, or there's an infection. The AV labs are provided with a sample, or they capture the sample using their own sandboxes, those systems they put on the internet, that happily click on everything that they receive. From that samples, they generate a signature. Basically, think of it like sequence and bytes and bits, but also with some logic, because they're smarter than that. They were able to like move inside the binary, look at different sectors and components, and sometimes they can profile it a little bit on runtime, or they can emulate some runtime environment, running the instructions to see if it matches the pattern, and it flags as malware and then blocks the execution, quarantines, and puts it on like a folder for the IT desk, IT folks to take a look at later, right? Just because if there's false positives, because signatures yield to a lot of false positives, you have to put them somewhere for IT to evaluate whether they're actually malware findings or it was some benign attachment that get caught up and triggered some alert. Now, this required you to have a bunch of patient zeros. It was reactive, right? It was after the fact, right? So, for example, when things like Code Red, which was there were older versions of that, but let's say in the more Windows-centric computing environment, become the dominant platform, endpoint platform. Code Red was the first big eye opener. What Code Red was, it leveraged a zero-day vulnerability, or let's say day one vulnerability that wasn't patched yet at scale, to propagate itself. So the AV vendors, these McAfee, Symantec were the top players back then. They didn't yet had a sample to build a signature while it was self-propagating, and if it was infecting the whole internet, right? It was branching into companies. It was a big mess. I remember spending sleepless nights just like figuring out which ones get compromised, re-imaging those machines. So with that, we understood that signatures were not good enough, because now we have this new tool that can self-propagate, that can scan the whole internet, find vulnerable machines, infect them. So it's too late to build a signature and push it out. It's already infected, right? So therefore, these new technologies came out looking for behavioral deviations from a baseline, what's considered to be a baseline. So for example, our tool back then did not like it when a web server writes an executable to disk. Like, web servers don't do that, right? Maybe they can write some temporary files to a temporary folder when they're like running some active content, but they don't create a PE file, an executable file on disk and run it later, right? So that was a trigger. That was a behavioral trigger, right? And that become kind of the original evolution of the endpoint security space, moving away from signatures to tracing applications, to building baselines. And from these baselines, when there was something like a deviation, a peak, an abnormal behavior, you'll flag it, you'll block it, and you will alert the operators.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because so much today is really heuristic based when you're looking at how SOC manages things, how you look at user risk, how you analyze user risk, how you flag anomalies. It's all based in, hey, this user never signs in from a Starbucks in San Francisco because they're always in Dallas. So
Mhm.
this is an anomaly. Let's flag this as a malicious event. But thank you for explaining that. So you got you're working for this now American company. What allowed you, or what motivated you to want to start your own company, and what did that entail versus being an operator or a individual contributor inside an organization?
I mean, over time, there is I guess, a cycle that you go through. Like you're a researcher, you're really um, genuinely, all you want to do is, find vulnerabilities, write remediations, see if you can scale these solutions. You're genuinely intellectually interested. Like, that's all you want to do every day, right? But over a period of time, you also built this, very opinionated, way of looking at the world, looking at your industry, looking at the challenges. And sometimes it doesn't always go your way, right? Like, you might be part of a very large organization. Let's say back then I was part of McAfee for a period of time. That startup got acquired by McAfee. Not all that you know organizational memory and all the the bureaucratic silos and fiefdoms that it built over time align with your maybe risk taking approach, whether you want to experiment with things. Maybe you're wrong, by the way, right? But nonetheless, right, it's just a natural cycle of things that you want to see. Okay, can I viably build something out of this and be able to bootstrap or attract some investment? When I first started, investments were not all that feasible, right? You really needed to have, let me put it this way: it wasn't as easy to raise seed or pre-seed money back then, or it was more bootstrapping, doing some consulting on the side. Maybe if you get lucky, you'll get some angels to back you. So by the time that I wanted to experiment with my ideas outside of this very rigid SRDs, BRDs planning, 3-year, 5-year budget plans, outside of that environment where you want to move really fast, break things, by the time I get out of this, I think I was at a certain age that I was also mature enough to be able to think all the other parts outside of research, all the other parts that are outside of breaking things or building things. So it takes a good 10 years, right, to get good at anything. And it sounds like a niche, but it sounds like a cliche, but it's true, right? It really took me about 10 years to mature as a person, as an individual, but try to also see other aspects of the landscape of building a business, operating one, interacting with marketing, sales, HR, field engineering, solution architects, pre-sales. Like, you build a little bit more of a sensible outlook of, okay, it's not like you're not some little demigod breaking things. No, there's a whole, group of people that makes these things viable, that make these things work, right? So once you learn to appreciate it, then I thought it was the right time for me to start with little consulting with the folks that I met over the years. All these businesses, companies, especially on the AppSec side. The world was still very complicated. Everything was getting compromised. Not that it changed a lot, but at the time, to me, it looked like hopeless. Right? SQL injection. Right? Every organization had very low hanging fruits when it comes to application security. Memory corruption was still not a sole problem. So anyhow, that led me to say, okay, maybe I'll reach back out to these folks that I met over the years. I can be more of a consulting capacity to help them find vulnerabilities in their applications while I bootstrap a product business. So that's how it kind of all started.
So you started with a service, but
Yeah.
you eventually created a product for that. Did you have the product in mind for that, or you eventually created a solution based on the need?
It's a bit of mixed. So my first company, actually, so I think we mentioned that when we first met, we talked about this briefly. I personally see two actual playbooks in cybersecurity. Yeah, there are some like edge cases where people build these interesting niche and net new greenfield businesses, but majority of the time it's two playbooks. One is you basically take something new and exciting, and there's a lot of tremendous hype behind it, like AI today, and you put security at the end of it, right? That's playbook number one. The second playbook is that you play the bigger, better, faster, the next gen playbook. You take something like VPN, you do ZTNA, zero trust network access, right? You make it better, faster, yada yada yada, right? You make it you kind of reinvent the whole space, maybe with some new narrative, maybe with some new technology, maybe with some new ideas. But that's the second playbook, right? Next gen. So when I was ready to start my own business, building over 10 plus years of experience, but also being able to appreciate all the other parts of building a business, mobile was the hot thing, right? And I was doing a lot of assessments on mobile applications, because at the end of the day, a lot of folks were using these like Electron was popular. They will just bake a mobile application into essentially like a
Mm-hmm.
local run browser on the mobile device, right?
Mm-hmm.
The APIs wouldn't have proper authentication. There will be a million ways to inject arbitrary content into them. They will have unencrypted data on the data store because mobile give them this false sense of security that people won't be able to extract them. So there was a lot of consulting that could be done, right? They will download the entire server-side content to be able to serve it faster to an application. It was easy to extract it. Like so, so there was a lot. There was a lot of really, really low-hanging fruits. I think even RSA conference did that. They built a mobile app for the conference, and they downloaded the entire attendees list into a SQLite database, which somebody extracted easily, right? So that was like how easy it was to poke holes in mobile apps, which led me to start my first company. At the time, it was mobile, so I started a mobile security business. So yeah, they kind of feed into the hype, the playbook, but also what I was intimately well at doing, auditing mobile apps.
Well, I think that's an important aspect to note for both those that are interested in the field but interested in entrepreneurship is that sometimes you have the moment where you see the need and you have the skills and capabilities so you can take advantage of that versus creating an entire new marketplace where now you have to go and educate leaders and users and everyone on this whole new thing that you built, and try to sell it to them versus trying to sell them something they already know and how to secure it. It
Spot
just
on.
makes it a lot easier. So I love that approach. So now you're growing your business. What made you decide to sell it, and what made you decide to start another one after that?
Right. I mean, so it's one thing to perhaps have the vision and the and kind of the drive. It's another thing, like Mike Tyson says, right? Like once you get punched in the nose, like all strategy is off, right? Like just now you're reacting. You're just reacting to stimuli, right? Because once you hit the road, get to work. We have some early successes. We signed an OEM, which I thought was brilliant because now we find some sort of a distribution. We were able to sell some licenses. I mean, I don't want to get into details. It's just every startup have their own way of getting punched in the face. We did sign something way bigger than we can chew, and we start getting basically overwhelmed and not being able to find other go-to-market motions outside of this OEM deal, right? So like you learn, right? You live and learn. Maybe it was a decision that could have been, or it should have been a deal that could have been done 3 5 years out when you're more mature, when
Mm-hmm.
you find your own go-to-market motion in the marketplace in an organic fashion. We kind of become almost this um, you know subsidiary of some kind that's trying to deliver on the needs of our major big OEM partner. So that was one thing that made me understand that okay, maybe it's the best thing to kind of roll this into a new house, and from this lesson learned, go do the next one right. Get your design partners, get your early set of customers. From there, build into some partnerships with resellers, distributors, system integrators. But at first, everything looks amazing, everything looks shiny, every revenue opportunity looks like something you should do. You try to be all things to everything, and that was kind of why I would say the first startup we decided to sell relatively early on. It was a great outcome, don't get me wrong. As a first time founder, we were very happy because it did solve an important problem, and it was complementing an existing platform. So it made sense at the time to get out when we can. The next one was more of a again changing tides and dynamics, and a genuine interest, I would say, to secure what mobile devices end up creating in the market. Teleworking or working from anywhere or working from home, whatever you want to call it. And this was just before the pandemic. We started the next startup in, again, using the second playbook this time, the next gen, better, bigger, faster,
Mm-hmm.
to modernize VPN, because mobile devices really made it possible now with like LTE, 5G connectivity, Wi-Fi being everywhere. Like you didn't need to be in the office, you didn't need to be plugged into a
Mm-hmm.
station. So that meant remote access like really become a critical, first critical, risk for businesses, right? It become a potential. I remember hearing terms like at the time island hopping. So, for example, you break into a contractor to the business, and from the contractor, you'll island hop into your target, right? Because they will have like persistent, SD-WAN connections, persistent
Mm-hmm.
VPN connections. So, mobile devices basically trigger this new revolution of work from anywhere, and to me felt like okay, we can do something better when it comes to the legacy VPN. Of course, there are companies like Duo that solve the kind of the strong authentication side, to do multiple factor authentication, but they were also getting into beyond core, zero trust, giving secure remote access. A lot of applications move from client server model with monolithic clients and servers to more web based. So the browser become kind of the interface for
Mm-hmm.
remote access. So it just made sense. It just made sense that you didn't need a very heavy, bloated solution like VPN that built these consistent and persistent, I should say, tunnels between a client and a backend, or a client and a network segment, right? You can essentially have these more dynamic, tunnels that you can create as you need access to a certain set of data or a certain application. So that was kind of what I thought was a good time to go and modernize the tooling that we use for remote access.
I love it because I think even today it's still something that organizations are trying to catch up to, and even though there's still a call back to office, the demand to have mobile work opportunities is still such a high requirement for many many stakeholders. Um, and looking at your background, you're definitely taking advantage of that, with such a beautiful backdrop. So I commend you on that. Um,
Right.
so you now revolutionize a new industry. Um, what are some of the lessons learned from this opportunity?
Oh, I shouldn't say we revolutionized. We did okay, but I think the winner, in my opinion, if I'm allowed to plug anybody, I'm
Absolutely.
really impressed with Tailscale. Eventually, those guys did it right. I mean, we used like some UDP encapsulation to move even TCP traffic. Like we did all kind of tricks as well, but the mobilization of WireGuard, they get it right. I think if there was a winner all, winner takes it all market. I think
Mhm.
Tailscale could be that for remote access. They got it right. I think they really lack some enterprise alignment features. Maybe they don't care, like their strategy and those kind of enterprise things might not align perfectly well just yet. But I think when it comes to the ease of use, the performance boost, I think they got it. They revolutionized. Credit where credit is due. The inventor of WireGuard and the Tailscale team who smartly take it and then operationalize and turn it into something that's super easy and delightful to use. That's your next gen, in my opinion, and very well executed.
I'd say I've used both of those technologies, WireGuard for creating my own home VPN solutions, and Tailscale for then being able to take out an IoT device and have its own connection to the internet without exposing the rest of the devices. Definitely great solutions there. Um, so now you're on to your third startup. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So that one also came from field experience, I would say, but it's a different kind of field experience. This time I wasn't very hands on. It wasn't about research, it wasn't about breaking things, it wasn't about necessarily a very product driven um, genesis point. It's usually it was always like whether I was doing red teaming, pen testing, I was doing application audits, security audits, and things like that. Or in the case of the remote access tooling, I was working at a product company with security products. Like I was intimately hands-on with these things. This time it came through actually talking to folks. My second startup, Fide, that was in the zero trust network access, the next gen VPN space, got acquired by Barracuda Networks. And they give me this amazing blessing of being able to talk to partners, managed service providers, outsource IT shops essentially, and hear a little bit about their problems, right? It was always about positioning a product. So I will talk to these folks to position my product, right? Hey, take it, sell it to your customers. Here's how it solves these problems. It's how, see, this is business continuity. Like you said, now in the age of post-pandemic, you never know what's going to happen. So it was always about pitching a new product, put it in your portfolio, sell it, sell it, sell it. Let me help you sell it. Let me enable you sell it. But they were coming back to me and saying, look, I don't need yet another tool. There's so many, right? Our problem is operating these tools for our customers. That really is our big challenge, right? And on top of it, we have an attrition problem because we will hire these folks out of trade schools sometimes no industry background whatsoever. We'll bring them up, we'll certify them, and rightly so. I mean, of course, they don't say it like that, but in my mind, I mean, they are doing the right thing. Then they're going to a corporate job, right? Instead of working at a very tough boiler room kind of an environment, triaging tickets all day. Once they level up, once they get to a certain level, they're taking corporate IT jobs. Kudos, right? But of course, for these partners, it's a big problem. They suddenly have a revolving door. They have an attrition problem. Therefore, they are looking into like, how am I going to operate these tools? How am I going to automate most of it so that I can do more with the people that I have, right? So that was kind of the genesis point of the startup, not looking into the playbooks, like I mentioned, the cybersecurity playbooks, not one and two, but more like listening, like intimate listening. I need better automation solutions that can do the work so that I can automate the most mundane, most boring, most repetitive ones. So the the engineers, the technicians that I have can do higher order functions, can do the more complicated things, right? Or can do things that cannot be done by software that needs to be, you need to lay out cables, you need to install access points, like they should be going and doing, being on the field, facing the customer, listening to them, helping them out, rather than like resetting another password or creating another account or redirecting somebody's email to somebody else, or adding somebody to a mailbox, group mailbox. Like those things should be automated end to end. And I found out that it wasn't that easy, because the world, unlike we've been told, doesn't really operate all well documented APIs. There's a long tail of applications that do not lend themselves to automation, do not offer APIs, might not support modern protocols like SCIM and others. So therefore, I need to really think hard on this one to see how can I automate some of these, repetitive, mundane things, that I can take them away from the technicians and engineers' hands, and so they can do better things with their time.
So how do you go through the ideation process of um, tinkering and creating and beta development of a solution like this? Because I think as a hacker, this is a core fundamental skill to see a problem and then try to create a solution. How do you go about doing that?
Christo, if I'm being honest, you are an accumulation of all the things over the years that you learn, and like all the sensory inputs, all the things that you worked on, get intimately, well and good, and use them actually, like in your day to day problem solving. So, in the mobile security days, like 2012, 2013, all the way to 2015, we were experimenting with, essentially, refactoring legacy applications on a mobile surface. That was the name of the game. Why? Because if you remember, like there were nonsense like mobile HTML, right? Because the regular good old HTML didn't render correctly on the mobile surface, right? So going back to my original point, like what I learned back then suddenly created kind of an aha moment for me. And what I learned back then is that you can use, for example, if it's a web page, you can use the DOM, the HTML elements, to have a semantic understanding of what's presented on that page. If you have a native application, a Java applet or a Windows, you can use accessibility API, right, for blind users, for hard to the disabilities. This is the system that built by operating system platform owners like Microsoft and especially Apple does a good job, that you can hover over the elements and it will read out what you're looking at, right? But you can use it in a programmatic way also to understand what's presented on the screen. Then there is the reverse engineering application security background that I come from, where we can kind of trace the application, essentially debug them in lifetime to understand what the UI frameworks are rendering by looking at the elements, right, in memory, right? So from those, I thought about maybe we can kind of build a semantic layer in text. Think of it like a JSON blob, right? Like an XML or something, right? Of what is visible on the screen to an LLM. Let's give LLM the eyes, right? Turns out, academia had done similar things, but my approach and my team's approach was, can we pair all these synthetic accessibility trees, which means we force them out of memory, HTML DOMs, and then accessibility trees that the operating systems provide for you for a large set of applications, and then build a layer that the LLM now can use it to orchestrate a workflow. So essentially trying to say, like, we're going to be the eyes and the hands for the AI model, and we're going to tell it what we see on the screen, and we're going to ask for the next step. When the next step is told us, we're going to then take the mouse, move it over, click, and type that, right? That was the original start. Well, of course, now we have these things called computer use models that does it out of the box. But that was the learning from the mobile era, where we're trying to redraw the screen of a legacy application for the mobile surface. We translate that into, can I get the LLM's orchestrate interfaces? That was kind of the product innovation.
Wow, I love that story, and it really goes into how you took the concept and you dove even deeper than I even thought about like how you would refactor this. Um, Amazing. So okay. Um, so now the app, does it even, you've evolved since. How has it evolved, and how is it helping solve that problem at scale for the clients that you're helping?
Right. It evolved tremendously. It was just a toy project, if you will, right? Can it even work, right? But now we have vision language models, essentially multimodality LLMs that can understand images, that can, do all that stuff. It was exciting, of course, and it sets itself apart very quickly from the legacy of the automation space called RPA when it comes to like UI orchestration. So it was easy to establish, but of course we had to evolve very fast. Now, what we do is we model the entire work end to end. So we do have a process mining step. Again, it's a fancy industry jargon. What it really means is that let me see you do it, right? So there's a little
Business
tool.
analyst approach.
Yeah, exactly. But we hate those jargony, business consulting terminology. So what we say it is like, do like a Zoom recording or a Loom clip. Like let us just record with an actual tool. We call it
Mhm.
Opnova Task Recorder. We record everything that you do on the screen. We want you to narrate what you're doing because we're also recording your voice, and I'll explain why that's helpful. And we're also recording the metadata that the UI actions are generating, left click, right click. When you scroll, how many page downs worth of scroll was that, right? Like we're recording all that information. And from that, and including your voice, because for example, we'll ask you a question while we're doing the recording. The tool is recording like you will record on Zoom or Loom. We'll stop you. Why did you choose the fourth option on the drop down, not the first three? Well, the fourth option is DHL, and DHL works better in Europe because this customer is in Europe, for example, right? Uh, but that transcription actually helps us to build reasoning steps, essentially in prompt, right? Like you're prompting the model. We'll take what you just described to us, and we'll say, take the location of the customer into consideration. Based on that, favor this for this continent or for this region. We will code that if we could capture it. If we didn't capture it, we'll go back and ask you again, right? So those are the reasoning steps. Essentially, those are the things that we cannot understand by looking at the screen. From the recording, we can understand all the UI components. But whatever is locked up in your mind, right, in your experience, the tacit knowledge, essentially, we need to extract and write it down. But recording an interview basically generates a prompt. Think of it like an SOP, a documentation of the process that you just done. And we then can use that using computer use models to automate the entire thing end to end. The last thing I'll add is that now this whole automation that we record, we model, we distill, and produce for production ready end-to-end automation needs to be now tied into a trigger. That's the final step. Is the trigger a ticketing system? Is the trigger an email? For example, an email comes in with a certain subject from a certain sender, and with a certain attachment. You can process it and enter it to an ERP, right? So you can basically decide, or it can be on a regular scheduler. But that's it. That's essentially end-to-end automation of a mundane task as it is done by an operator.
Wow. And that could be, it sounds like that could be any kind of task, whether it be cybersecurity related or even finance related. It sounds like you could use this in a whole variety of industries.
That is correct. We started in cybersecurity and the adjacencies like GRC and IT, collecting screenshots of global admins from a dashboard, that kind of stuff, right? Or adding and removing and disabling, enabling accounts. Think of it as extending your IGA practice. If you're a Salesforce customer, Savient customer, we can then help you extend that workflow engine to applications that don't have APIs, that don't support SCIM, that doesn't have some sort of a data upload method to
Hmm.
do this stuff, right? By orchestrating the UI, because guess what? Those end up being tickets anyway to be solved by help desk, right?
Yeah.
So that was the initial start, but you're spot on. Eventually, we branched out from the IT org, from the CIO or the CISO org to more the CFO, more the AP/AR function, processing invoices, reconciliation, expense support management, all those things now in our wheelhouse, and they're also quite exciting. It takes me really out of my comfort zone, being in this space for 25 years, but also makes it really, really exciting and interesting.
Well, what's interesting to me, and that I love pointing out to folks, even in the adjacent fields, is how if someone were in finance, if someone were in some of these other fields, how the skills and capabilities from those fields are transferable to IT and vice versa. And that just goes to show when you're building a tool that has a variety of use cases, don't limit it to just one industry because that's where the initial focus was. Eventually branch out, and then your tool can have that wider breadth of a customer base, and you're not locked into um, like your first one, your first company, where you had supplier risk because
Mhm.
you had one main supplier, and
That's right.
therefore if that one supplier said jump, you said how high because they controlled the majority of the budget or the majority of your cash flow. So important things for companies to, or solopreneurs or entrepreneurs to understand is when you're running your own business, understanding how many vendors you have, where your cash flow is coming from. Those are all important things to understand. And also, some of the other things I wanted to pull out from the tips and tricks that you highlighted was a lot of these things that you talked about in building companies are the same things that you need to do in becoming an internal leader as well. So, understanding how marketing works, understanding how the other department works, because in order to fully support them, you have to understand their workflow. You have to understand their needs because you can't just say, "Hey, we're stopping this application because," and don't listen to any of their responses because you said so. You have to understand their use cases and potentially work with them to create some sort of altered mitigation to allow their application to function, or work with them to find a better application that minimizes the risk and allows the business to continue to be enabled to deliver their mission.
That's a great insight. Spot on. That's 100% correct. Yeah, and especially I like what you said about learning the other functions, how they operate. Um, through this, through this company, through this business, we learned this technical thing, but called BPM, and it's business process modeling and notation. Essentially, it's just another way of calling a workflow diagram, right? They have their own little notations and the way they identify certain things, but at the end of it, it looks like a flow chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
uh, but we started doing these because whenever we listen to oh, this thing takes me like 20 hours a week, it's waste of time. Something, for example, about renewals, right? Like I need to reach out to every customer before their license ran out, or internal stakeholders before their license expire. I need to renew that. We need to allocate budget. We need to put it into the purchase order, into ERP. Takes a lot of time, right? But whenever you listen to that problem, you're like lost because the organization over time built so much complexity into it, right? So the first thing we offer them is that let's model it. Let's like really build this into something that, even if you don't work with us, even if we don't even do a POC or this goes nowhere, at the end of the day, you got documentation built by us, right? And why I'm suggesting this is a good exercise for even security leaders, new CISOs. If you can build these out for them, it's value add for them, right? Like if a certain critical employee leaves or
Mm-hmm.
for a better job, or some or just retires, right? Like now you have documentation, you can ramp somebody up. You're not like lost. Second, you as the security leader, now you actually can look at that and visualize risk, right? You can actually, it can infer your job. You're doing them a service, you're helping them out, But at the same time, by intimately understanding what the hell do they do all day, every day, you can actually start poking holes in the whole workflow. You can improve the workflow. You can put more guardrails around it, right? I think it's a great idea to genuinely interview them with the mindset to understand exactly what they do, right? If you can
Oh,
carve out that time, it's a valuable exercise.
Absolutely. I've been helping this organization with their high trust process, and one of the things over the years is network diagrams, data flow diagrams, system flow diagrams, and the more I understand their system and how each of the models interact with each other across the entire ecosystem, now I can make better recommendations on what they can do to limit risk. And yet, yesterday or 2 days ago, someone built a different model that now showed before they just had the servers on a network stack. Now someone built a model that showed the data flow and the different areas and everything together. And I'm like, oh, now I see it in a different perspective. Now I can go, oh, okay, this flows to this in this process. Now we can talk about the risk here in this and what we could do to secure it. So definitely, I encourage everyone to do things like that because one, your auditors will definitely love you for having things like that. But two, as a security leader, it helps you better understand your environment.
Spot on. And it was potentially the least attractive thing to do when we were starting up in our careers, right? You wanted to break stuff, or you wanted to do cloud security, you wanted to do network endpoint security. These were like the technically, gratifying things. You can, do really groundbreaking things. But turns out, without actually doing this hard work of understanding how the business operates, it's useless. Like, you might
Yeah.
deploy the state of the art, still doesn't matter because you don't really quite understand where the actual risk lies, right? So yeah, I suffered from that, I'll admit, right? With this, especially with this last experience, I'm actually listening better, because it was all about, like, I've been there, I've seen everything. Your cloud security configs are crap. Your endpoint practice is outdated. No, just hold on a sec. Like, probably there's so many other things that you need to understand before we can be prescriptive about tooling. Tooling should come last.
So we have a couple of minutes left.
Sure.
What last piece of parting advice would you give to someone based on your years of experience and your unique perspective?
If you're just starting out, should I assume that it's like somebody just starting out?
All levels.
Okay, it's very exciting if you're just starting out. I wouldn't have said that a couple years ago, because I was genuinely impressed and enamored and, like, in love with the level of security that we have in mobile devices today. Like, I mean, iOS and the new Android, versions are just massive, robust devices. I mean, you know this because the vulnerabilities go for $1 million if they're like multi-chain, if like zero click, all that nonsense, right? It's just a robust computing device, unbelievable. So, coming from this, like, endpoint security, breaking things kind of background, I thought we've done a great job. We sold most things, right? I was thinking like that. But then again, industry is a way to humble you, and then they come up with LLMs. Now LLMs is worse than the first days of SQL injection, because prompt injection is unsolvable. You cannot separate the instruction from the data. All the startups that are selling, they're doing that. Just go challenge them all day, every day. It's such a huge red teaming opportunity. If you're just starting out, like I did start out on the offensive side, on the pen test, AppSec, finding vulnerabilities side, it was memory corruption, it was SQL injection, it was web application issues. PHP was a gold mine, keep on giving. Now you have the same. Now you have your PHP. Now you have your SQL injection. Now you have your basic string copy operations, memory corruption bugs in AI implementations. It's a great opportunity to be a red teamer for that. And it requires a total different mindset and a skill set. You don't need to be classically trained in various programming languages or architectures and all that. It's a total different way of approaching this problem. So you might be a creative person coming from English literature. You might have a better chance, right? So it's a great time to enter into the space doing red teaming against LLM powered tooling and applications, AI models behind that. And if you are more advanced in your career, I would say, working with your teams, because there is this mandate, almost top-down mandate to leverage AI. I would also say that it's golden opportunity, but your job is going to be tougher, of course, to be able to put guardrails in place. I don't admire your job, to be honest. If you're more advanced in your career, it's going to be uphill battle for you. But if you're just starting and if you want to enter through kind of like pen testing, LLMs and AI powered applications, you're going to live through a gold rush. So go enjoy it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the episode, and listeners, thank you for listening. Everyone else, have a great day.